Do not move that box another inch, Mark." Her voice cracked through the morning air like a gavel. Karen Holt, clipboard queen of Willow Ridge, stood in my driveway, blocking the moving truck like she owned the asphalt beneath her heels. Her sunglasses caught the early light, reflecting my own disbelief back at me. I froze, mid-lift hands gripping the cardboard box marked Office Personal Files, the kind of label that only matters when someone is trying to accuse you of stealing your own life. "Excuse me," I said slowly. "You heard me," she barked. "You cannot remove property without HOA clearance. It is a violation of Section 12A. Section 12A, I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, the county released my lot weeks ago." "I am not part of the HOA anymore." She flipped open her binder like a courtroom exhibit. Pages rustled like judgment. "You still owe $2,980 in community integrity fees? Until those are cleared, you are in violation. Unauthorized relocation." 2 curtains shifted across the street. Neighbors peered through slits of privacy phones already raised like paparazzi for the neighborhood's latest scandal. The air smelled of cut grass, hot pavement, and accusation. My laugh came out low, humorless. "Karen, I am just moving boxes." Her pen scratched against her clipboard. "Non-compliance will be documented." Then she raised her phone. Smile. The phone camera clicked, followed by the sound of her dialing. Seconds later, the distant wail of sirens cut through the suburban calm. I stared at her part, tired part amused. "You called the cops." In Willow Ridge, she said, "Chin-high freedom still needs approval." The red and blue lights splashed across my garage door before I could answer. 2 officers stepped out, one older one young enough to still care what the older one thought. Their expressions said this was not their first HOA call of the week. "Morning, sir," the older one started carefully. "We got a report of property removal without authorization." "Morning," I replied. "Just moving out." Karen folded her arms triumphant. "He is taking HOA protected items." I looked down at the box in my hands, then back at her. Protected. They are my wife's photo frames. The younger officer sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, unless this is community property, he is allowed to leave." Karen's smile faltered just slightly. "Well, I will be filing an official incident report." "You do that," I said, sliding the box into the truck. "I will file mine with reality." As the sirens faded, the neighborhood stayed frozen, doors cracked open, curtains twitching. Everyone loved a scandal until it was their turn in it. I looked around at the manicured lawns, every mailbox painted the same shade of HOA beige, every blade of grass trimmed to regulation height. This place did not breathe anymore. It performed. When my wife Laura was alive, Willow Ridge felt different. She would sit on our porch in the golden hour, sipping tea, sunlight threading through her hair as she would tell me about the lake where she grew up. "That is where we will end up someday," she used to say, "where the only rules are the weather and our patience." After she died, the quiet changed. It was not peace anymore, it was absence, the kind that reminded you someone should still be humming in the kitchen. So I followed the rules, all of them. I kept the lawn perfect, paid every fee, waved at every new couple with their identical smiles, because rules gave me something to hold on to when everything else felt untethered. But grief and order are both illusions. Sooner or later, one cracks. Then came the signs. Trash bins must be out no earlier than 6 a.m. Decor must conform to subdivision standards. All structures require visual approval. Each new rule arrived like another lock on a door that used to stay open. Emails turned into letters. Letters turned into warnings. Warnings turned into fines. By the time Karen Holt became HOA president, Willow Ridge was not a community, it was a checklist. Every smile came with small print. Every porch conversation was monitored by silence. That was the day I decided I was leaving. Not just the house, the system. The morning after I listed the property, the neighborhood felt too quiet. No sprinklers, no kids, no birds. Just the hum of air conditioners behind closed blinds. When I opened the door, I found a letter taped dead center on the glass red ink, bold enough to bleed through. Final compliance review relocation of assets. At the bottom, Karen's signature, followed by a new accusation. Resident has initiated relocation without prior security oversight as required by Section 14C. Security oversight, I muttered. It was not even real HOA language. It was mimicry bureaucratic cosplay. Across the street, Mrs. Harding was watering her begonias, pretending not to stare. "Morning, Mark," she said. Voice too gentle. "Got one of those letters again?" "Not exactly," I said. "This one is in red. I think it is an upgrade." She tried to smile. "Karen fined the Alvarezes yesterday. Wrong shade of beige on their shed." I folded the paper, slipping it under my arm. "Power is addictive, especially when you do not have much of it." She hesitated. "Word is, she has been asking around about you. Background irregularities," she said. That stopped me cold. Inside, I set the letter on the counter next to Laura's old coffee cup, the one with her lipstick stain that I never washed off. The sunlight hit the red ink, turning it from a warning into a dare. I had seen those phrases before: security oversight, asset relocation. They did not belong in HOA language. They belonged in federal memos, the kind I used to redact, back before I was Mark Lewis, widower systems analyst. I leaned against the counter, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Careful, Karen," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "You are playing a game you do not understand." That night, I sat on the porch, the same one Laura called our lighthouse, and reread the letter by its glow. The ink gleamed like a threat. Somewhere down the street, Karen's light blinked out. Mine stayed on. For the first time since Laura died, I did not feel hollow. I felt awake. The next morning, I walked into the Willow Ridge HOA office. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 2 flags hung behind the front desk, one American, one HOA branded. A bulletin board lined with laminated rules stared me down like scripture. Behind the desk sat Karen Holt, her blazer crisp, her power smile perfectly practiced. She did not look up right away. She wanted me to wait. I did not mind. I had waited long enough. When she finally did look up, her eyes flicked over me the way a customs officer checks luggage. "Mr. Lewis," she said with that thin smile, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" I placed the letter on her desk, its red ink facing up like blood on white marble. "You taped this to my door yesterday," I said. "Let's clear it up." Karen's office smelled like toner and lemon disinfectant, fake cleanliness masking rot. Her desk gleamed like a courtroom bench, every pen aligned, every folder squared. She had built her kingdom on perfect corners. Finally, she smiled, thin, deliberate. "Your compliance review, Mr. Lewis. Standard procedure when a resident relocates without HOA clearance." "I am not a resident," I said evenly. "The county released my lot 6 weeks ago. You can check the record." She folded her hands as if preparing a sermon. "According to our updated boundaries, your property remains under Section 4. Updated when? Last quarter," she replied, eyes unblinking. "Announcements were sent in our monthly bulletin." I let out a soft laugh. "You mean the bulletin that stopped arriving after I opted out?" A tiny flicker crossed her face, the kind you would miss if you had not spent years reading interrogations. Jaw tightens, eyes drop. She recovered fast. "Opting out does not exempt you from community responsibility," she said. "It simply limits your voting privileges." "That is a fascinating interpretation of county law," I replied. "Tell me, did your board use certified survey data for those new boundaries?" Of course, she said automatically. Because I continued, I checked the county registry. No new plat filed, no surveyor signature, which means either the update is pending or it is fiction. Her pen froze mid-tap. The silence in that office felt like air before lightning. "You seem very informed for a systems analyst," she said, finally, forcing a small laugh. "Old habits," I said. "I like knowing how people move lines on a map." For the first time, she looked directly at me, not as a homeowner, but as an unknown variable. I could almost hear the recalibration in her head. "Be careful, Mr. Lewis," she said softly. "Challenging HOA policy can be time-consuming." I met her, gaze unflinching. "I have time." Her smile thinned to a blade. "We only enforce order here. Without structure, communities fall apart. Order's not the problem," I said. "Ownership is." She blinked. "Just once." Then her mask slid neatly back into place. "People rarely win against the board. That is because most people play by your rules." She tilted her head. "And you do not." Let's just say, I said, turning toward the door. I have seen bigger systems collapse from the inside. Outside, the sunlight felt cleaner. The same flags that drooped behind her desk now fluttered free. As I walked to my truck, I was not angry, just certain. Karen was not enforcing rules. She was protecting something. And whatever it was worth her lying for. By the end of the week, the mailbox had become a weapon. Every morning, a new beige envelope appeared, same font, same tone, same signature, K-Hold President. The first accused me of soil erosion. The second cited driveway instability. The third, unauthorized lawn pattern modification. Each dated within 24 hours of the last. It was not a system anymore, it was harassment by design. I did not throw them away. I archived them. Every one. Photos of postmarks, PDF copies, metadata logs. Every single letter came from the same laptop, same Word version, same serial tag Karen's machine. I had seen tactics like this before, not in neighborhoods, but in operations. Overwhelm the target. Flood them in noise until they either fold or lash out. They were trying to exhaust me. I smiled. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The next fine came Sunday, excessive mailbox wear and tear. I laughed out loud. The irony burned sweet. Neighbors started whispering. Mrs. Harding brought me coffee from her porch one morning. They are trying to drive you out before you leave, she said. That is one way to make sure I do not change my mind, I replied. 2 days later, a young couple slipped an envelope under my door. Inside were screenshots of their own fines. Same wording, same template, same ridiculous tone. A note written in pencil read, "She is going after anyone who questions her. You are just the one she cannot scare." By now, even the silence felt curated. At night, an HOA patrol car passed my house like clockwork, same time, same slow crawl. Not illegal, just unnerving. Surveillance dressed as community watch. I started to understand why everyone kept their heads down. Fear does not always shout. Sometimes it just whispers, "Stay quiet." But I was not angry. Not yet. Mostly, I was intrigued. Because every lie has a seam, and Karen's seams were starting to show. Her letters grew longer, more desperate. Failure to comply may result in property reassessment. Continued violations could affect your neighborhood standing. Neighborhood standing. A phrase that meant absolutely nothing written to sound like power. By now, my desk looked like a war map. Stacks of envelopes, folders, timestamps, metadata. I labeled one binder, pattern evidence, dates, fonts, property code, mismatches. I cross-referenced everything. That is when I noticed it. Something small, but perfect. The HOA's digital portal showed timestamps earlier than the printed notices. The fines were being backdated. That was not carelessness, it was orchestration. They were not documenting truth, they were fabricating order. That realization hit with the weight of an old instinct, the kind that used to wake me in the middle of the night during investigations. This was not about grass height or fences, it was systemic manipulation, and now it was personal. I leaned back in my chair looking at the sea of envelopes spread across my table like a collage of intimidation. A thought drifted in, quiet, razor sharp. They weaponized commas. Outside the sprinkler, timers clicked on in perfect unison, regulated obedient. Inside, I opened my laptop. If they wanted a paper war, I would fight it with precision. Because they had forgotten one thing: paper cuts both ways. By the 5th, notice irritation gave way to curiosity. The phrasing in Karen's letters felt off, too formal, too polished, like someone had stolen the tone of a government memo. That night, I stopped reacting and started reading. I logged into the HOA's online filing system. It looked like a relic gray interface, clunky menus, half-dead links. Buried 6 layers deep was the document Karen quoted, constantly. Willow Ridge Homeowners Association Compliance Handbook Revised. I scrolled straight to the section she kept throwing at me, 12, a unauthorized relocation. Except, it was not there. The document jumped cleanly from 12 to 13. No missing pages, no hidden edits, just gone. I downloaded the file, opened its metadata. Last modified March. Modified by R. Holt, Richard Holt, Karen's husband. I stared at the screen for a long time. HOA bylaws are not supposed to be edited by spouses, especially not contractors tied to the same board. The revision notes read, "Update formatting and integrate security protocol references." There it was again, security protocol references. The same term from the red letter notice taped to my door. I was not looking at oversight anymore. I was looking at imitation, someone copying the tone of authority to feel untouchable. And Richard Holt was not just Karen's husband. He owned Holt Property Solutions, the HOA's exclusive maintenance contractor. His trucks had been parked in the neighborhood for years, white vans with vinyl decals that looked official until you read the fine print. Curiosity turned surgical. I opened county payment records, no updated surveys, no plat filings. But a trail of invoices popped up. Over the last 12 months, Willow Ridge HOA had issued multiple payments to Holt Property Solutions. Amounts varied $800, $1,000, $400, $2,000, $300. Descriptions changed. Landscape audit, compliance consulting, infrastructure review. But every invoice shared one signature, K, Holt. I felt that familiar click in my chest, the kind that used to happen right before an arrest warrant. I extracted metadata from each PDF. Creation dates did not line up with the service dates. One invoice had been created on a Sunday, the same day Karen emailed me a violation. This was not sloppiness, it was laundering with better stationery. Every fee she wrote was a microtransaction, feeding their private account. Every fine was fear turned into currency. They had turned community order into a business model. By midnight, my desk looked like evidence, not paperwork, timestamps, signatures, transaction logs. The quiet in my house changed. It was not grief anymore, it was purpose. I brewed another coffee labeled a new binder Willow Ridge Audit. Every piece of data went inside, scanned, cross-referenced, and backed up twice. By noon, I had sent record requests to the County Assessor Utilities Department and Registrar of Deeds. If Karen wanted to redraw boundaries, I would make her prove them line by line. That afternoon, I looked out the window. At the corner of the street, Richard's white van sat idling again longer than usual. Our eyes met through the windshield. He smiled. That smug, empty kind of smile that comes from thinking you own the story. I smiled back, quiet, measured. Because he did not know how many pages I had already rewritten. This was not harassment anymore. This was evidence. And I was not the target. I was the investigation. The next morning felt heavier, as if the air itself knew too much. I had not slept, just watched the digital clock crawl from 3 a.m. to sunrise, while lines of data burned behind my eyelids. By breakfast, my table looked like a command center. Printed invoices fanned out beside coffee rings. Every file I touched seemed to hum with quiet corruption. The HOAs of America were not supposed to look like this, but corruption rarely announces itself. It hides in paperwork, in commas, in fonts. I started cross-checking the invoices against county payments. The numbers did not match HOA funds, left one account and landed in another under the same last name, Holt. Each consulting fee moved money in circles that began and ended inside their marriage. I traced 10 transactions before the pattern became undeniable. Karen's signature approved every single one. It was not administration, it was embezzlement with polite stationery. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt something calmer, professional clarity. This was a pattern, not a grudge. It followed a rhythm I had learned years ago when I still wore a badge. Back then, we called it administrative laundering. Small communities made perfect test beds. No auditors, no reporters, just trust. And Willow Ridge was trusting itself straight into bankruptcy. A soft knock pulled me from the spreadsheet. On my porch stood Mrs. Harding, still in her gardening apron eyes, darting left and right. She held a plate of cookies, like an alibi. "Morning," she whispered. "Thought you could use these." Then, lower, "I also brought this." She slipped a folded paper from under the napkin, a violation notice identical to mine. "Bird feeder non-compliance," she said bitterly. I did not even know bird feeders had rules. I scanned the page. Same font, same typo in the footer. "Thank you for your continued cooperation." That missing N had become their fingerprint. "Keep this," I told her. "It is more valuable than cookies." She frowned. "What are you doing with all this?" "Building a story," I said. "Stories make patterns. Patterns make proof." Her smile was nervous, but real. About time someone stood up to her. By nightfall, 2 more neighbors had come. The Alvarezes brought photocopies of double fines for a fence inspection that never happened. The Chens arrived carrying a flash drive. "We backed up the HOA portal before Karen deleted posts," they whispered. Inside, the files were message logs, Karen and her husband discussing fee opportunities in direct chat. Every line was arrogance typed in Helvetica. We met on my porch because it was neutral ground. No one spoke loudly. The walls in Willow Ridge had ears, or at least ring doorbells. Documents spread across the table like a secret map. Each sheet another confession in plain sight. It was not rebellion, not yet. It was awakening. 5 neighbors who had lived side by side for years without ever truly speaking now, united by fear that had finally run out of silence. Mrs. Harding broke first. "She fined me twice for the same bird feeder," she whispered. Mr. Alvarez nodded. "She said my trash bins were visible from the street on pickup day." The Chens exchanged a look. "She even made us move our satellite dish because it faced the wrong constellation." For a second, laughter cut through the tension, tired, disbelieving laughter. We were not criminals. We were just tired of pretending to be obedient. I gathered every sheet, sorted them into piles, duplicate fines, fabricated clauses, forged signatures, each stack another nail in Karen's coffin. "She built power on paper," I said quietly, "so we will bring her down with paper." The group fell silent, then nodded. No rallies, no signs, just evidence. The kind that does not need shouting to be heard. The kind that ends careers. After they left, I stayed on the porch staring at Karen's lit window across the street. She was still awake, pacing phone pressed to her ear. I could almost hear her voice through the night. Non-compliance must be disciplined. I smiled into the darkness. Let her write one more notice. I had already written the ending. Days passed. Every morning, more envelopes arrived. But now I photographed the courier, time-stamped the delivery, and logged the GPS metadata. What used to be harassment had become evidence collection. My scanner whirred so often it sounded like machinery in a crime lab. I was building a case without a court date yet. By midweek, half the block knew. No one said it aloud, but the energy shifted. Lawns grew a little wild. Mailboxes stayed unpainted. Tiny acts of civil disobedience bloomed like dandelions after rain. Control was cracking. Fear was losing its grip. That Friday, I opened the portal again and searched every public upload. Dozens of documents shared the same editing trail. Our Holt, he had rewritten bylaws, reformatted receipts, even edited the HOA's meeting minutes. It was a one-man echo chamber disguised as governance. And every edit strengthened the same pair of hands. I compiled everything into a single PDF Willow Ridge compliance anomalies. 42 pages of fraud disguised as structure. I uploaded a copy to a secure cloud, emailed another to a friend still in federal forensics. Subject line, need you to read this quietly. If Karen wanted order, she was about to get an audit. The next night, the porch meeting doubled. Word had spread through whispers and group texts. 15 neighbors showed up, retirees, young parents, people I had barely spoken to in a decade. They brought folders, flash drives, hope. For once, the fear in their eyes was outweighed by something else, trust. It was small, fragile, but real. We divided the documents like a task force. Mr. Alvarez handled financials. The Chens monitored the online portal. Mrs. Harding cross-checked signatures with county archives. I oversaw the timeline. When the last piece fit, the pattern was undeniable. Every fine funded Holt Property Solutions. Every fee bought their control. For years they had preyed on silence. Now, silence had company. The neighbors were not rebellious by nature, they were just done being measured by fear, and when people stop being afraid, control loses its currency. Karen just did not know the economy had changed. The decision came naturally. We would bring it to the next HOA meeting, open forum public record. Expose her in the room she controlled. No angry mob, no threats, just truth under fluorescent lights. Mrs. Harding looked terrified. What if she shuts it down? She will not, I said. She thinks the system is hers. That is her mistake. The night before the meeting, I could not sleep again. I sat by the window watching the HOA patrol car crawl past one last time. Its headlights swept over my desk, glinting off the binder labeled evidence, the sound of order patrolling its own funeral. I thought of Laura then, of how she used to say that roses were stubborn things, blooming even when the soil was dry. The people of Willow Ridge had been dry for years. Tomorrow they would bloom again. All they needed was light. When morning came, the streets were strangely alive. Neighbors stood in driveways, talking for the first time without whispering. No lawns being measured, no clipboards, just faces. A shift in the weather you could feel beneath your skin, the kind of quiet before a different kind of storm. That evening, I buttoned my shirt, slid the binder under my arm, and headed to the clubhouse. The same room where Karen handed out fines would now hold her reckoning. For years, this place echoed with rules. Tonight, it would echo with truth. The Willow Ridge Clubhouse had never been this crowded. Usually, HOA meetings drew maybe 6 people. Half of them retired, the rest there for free coffee. Tonight, every folding chair was taken, the air buzzing with whispers and the faint hum of old fluorescent lights. Rules and fear had built this room. Curiosity had finally brought it down. At the front, the board table gleamed under the lights, 3 nameplates centered like judges on trial. In the middle sat Karen Holt, floral blazer, perfect posture, the smile of someone trying to hold gravity in her hands. She tapped the mic, once clearing her throat. "Good evening, Willow Ridge residents. Let's maintain order and keep tonight's discussion productive." Her voice quivered on order. She shuffled her notes, pretending not to notice the packed room, watching her instead of listening. Beside her, the vice president stared at the table. The treasurer picked invisible lint off his sleeve. The smell of burnt coffee and unease filled the space. She started down the agenda. Mailbox, uniformity, landscaping, budgets, and compliance activity, someone muttered from the back. A ripple of laughter broke the silence. Karen's jaw tightened. As I was saying, I stood. No plan, just timing. Her eyes locked on mine, that frozen smile cracking like porcelain. "Mr. Lewis," she said, voice brittle, "you have 2 minutes. 2 will do." I walked to the podium, the binder under my arm, heavier than any weapon. Every step sounded too loud against the tile. "Evening," I began quietly. "I just want to clear up a few things." I set the red ink letter on the podium, the same one she had taped to my door. "This," I said, holding it up, "is what started my week." A projector hummed as I placed it under the document camera. The letter filled the wall behind me in giant red words. Final Compliance Review Section 12, a unauthorized relocation. Karen's voice snapped. "That is official correspondence." Except I said evenly, Section 12A does not exist. I clicked to the next slide. The bylaw document appeared sections 1 through 13, the clean skip, where 12A should have been. C. No redactions, no missing pages. Modified March 12 by R. Holt. Heads turned. Back corner. Her husband froze, mid-sip coffee halfway to his mouth. For context, I continued, Mr. Holt owns Holt Property Solutions, our exclusive maintenance contractor. I flipped to another slide. Invoices, signatures, dollar amounts, over $3,000 in consulting fees, all approved by one person, Karen Holt. Murmurs rolled through the crowd like thunder beneath carpet. Karen's fingers gripped the table. "Mr. Lewis," she stammered, "this is a misinterpretation." "Of course," I said, "which is why the county auditor will confirm every line item." A few gasps. One soft. About time. Karen slammed her palm on the table. "Order. We will have order." Her voice echoed desperate brittle. Mrs. Harding stood from the third row, clutching a binder of her own. "You fined me twice for my bird feeder," she said, trembling but loud. "Same invoice number both times." Karen's cheeks flushed. "That was handled appropriately." Then why, I said, flipping slides, does that same invoice number appear again, this time as a payment to Holt Property Solutions for pest mitigation consulting? The room erupted. Whispers turned to shouts, disbelief, mixing with laughter. Karen's gavel voice cut through. "This is defamation. You will be held legally accountable." I met her eyes calm. Defamation only applies when it is not true. The laughter that followed was not cruel, it was relief. People exhaled years of fear in one sound. She turned on me, face red. You think you can humiliate me in front of my own community? I did not answer. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, precisely on cue. The signal, Karen sneered. More theatrics, Mr. Lewis. I smiled faintly. You might want to stay seated for this next part. The doors opened. 2 county officials stepped inside, clipboards and hand badges glinting beneath their jackets. The crowd fell into stunned silence. One spoke clearly, Mrs. Holt, we are here regarding the HOA audit request. We will need to review your financial records tonight. Karen blinked her mouth, opening and closing like a door that forgot its purpose. Audit, someone whispered. Mrs. Harding murmured, he filed it. I nodded toward the officials. 3 days ago. State transparency statute. Karen's throat tightened. You cannot just... Ma'am, the auditor interrupted gently, this is a lawful compliance review. We will need your cooperation. The applause started small, then grew. Slow claps turned to steady rhythm, the sound of neighbors remembering what fairness felt like. Even the vice president joined in. Karen's husband muttered something about misunderstandings and edged toward the door. I closed the binder, folded my notes. This did not have to happen here, I said softly into the mic. All you had to do was stop pretending control was the same thing as order. Her eyes shimmered, not with guilt, but humiliation. Authority without obedience is just costume, and hers was unraveling thread by thread. The officials approached the table. Mrs. Holt, your access credentials, please. She did not move. The crowd leaned forward. I spoke once more into the microphone. Order meets reality tonight. And reality always wins. The room exploded in applause, half laughter, half liberation. For the first time, Willow Ridge sounded alive. As I turned to leave, the older official nodded. Good timing, Agent. The word landed like a spark in dry grass. A few people heard. Then a whisper spread from row to row. FBI, Karen did not. Not yet. Outside the clubhouse, the air smelled like rain and victory. But inside, the storm was not over. The meeting had ended yet. Karen stayed behind, pacing the room like a caged animal. Through the glass, I watched her phone light up, her face desperation sharp in every gesture. She was making a call. Old habits die hard. Yes, officer, she said into the receiver voice, pitched high enough to pierce the glass. I would like to report theft. He is taking HOA property files documents. He is stealing from the association. Her words bounced off the empty chairs. Outside, I waited calm binder in hand, watching truth finally finish what arrogance started. Moments later, the same 2 patrol officers from weeks ago stepped through the door. Karen rushed toward them, relief blooming into hysteria. Officers, arrest this man, she demanded. He has stolen confidential materials. They looked from her to me, recognition dawning slow. I said nothing. I just set the binder on the table and opened my wallet. The badge caught the fluorescent light clean gold final. Special Agent Mark Lewis, I said evenly. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Silence collapsed over the room like a wave. Even the air stopped moving. Karen's mouth trembled. You. No, that is impossible. You lied. I told you I was moving, I said. Did not say from where. Her voice broke. You tricked us. You cannot. I did not trick you, Karen. You did that yourself. I gestured to the binder. 14 fraudulent invoices in 6 months, each approved under your authority. All routed through Holt Property Solutions, a company that has not been legally active since last year. The younger officer turned a page, his brow furrowing. This enough to start. More than enough, I said. Tonight gave us the missing link. Karen's shoulders slumped. You cannot do this, she whispered. I was maintaining order. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who built a kingdom out of fear and paperwork, now standing in the ruins of her own rules. Order is not control, I said quietly. It is honesty with boundaries. The older officer nodded once to his partner. Mrs. Holt, we are going to need you to come with us. She stumbled back, mascara streaking. You cannot arrest me, I called you. Yes, ma'am, the officer said dryly, and you called us on the FBI. A ripple of laughter moved through the remaining neighbors' disbelief, wrapped in satisfaction. As the cuffs clicked shut, I felt no triumph, only equilibrium returning. For years, she had used silence as armor. Now, truth made the noise she never could suppress. The officers led her toward the door. She turned once, eyes wet. "You played me," she said. I shook my head. "No, Karen. You played everyone. I just stopped the game." The door closed. The room exhaled. Applause rose again, louder, freer, like a hymn with no leader. I did not bow or smile. I just gathered the scattered pages and said softly, "Thank you for your cooperation." Outside, the patrol lights painted the clubhouse red and blue colors of freedom this time. The sirens faded before the applause did. Even after Karen was gone, the sound lingered, a low murmur of disbelief that refused to settle. Neighbors stood in clusters, their faces half stunned, half relieved, like people waking up from a long shared nightmare. For years, we had all lived under the same unspoken rule: keep your head down, stay out of trouble. Tonight, that rule finally broke. The vice president stepped forward first, his voice shaking but clear. "I move that we suspend all board activities pending investigation." The treasurer nodded before he could finish. Seconded. Then, one by one, hands went up. Every single one. The motion carried without opposition. It was the first unanimous vote Willow Ridge had seen, and probably the first one that ever mattered. I watched it unfold from the back of the room, arms crossed, expression steady. This was not about me anymore. It was about the people learning to breathe again. The fear that had hung in every porch light and mailbox finally lifted, replaced by something I had not seen here in years: curiosity. People looked at each other differently now, not as threats, not as neighbors under surveillance, just neighbors. By the next morning, the news had already spread. Local outlets picked it up. HOA president and contractor husband under federal investigation. The photo showed Karen's floral blazer rumpled and defeated as officers guided her to the cruiser. For once, the headlines did not exaggerate. The story did not need it. Emails flooded my inbox from other HOAs around the state, whispers from homeowners who had been fined, bullied, silenced. They wrote about the same language, the same integrity clauses, the same tone of control, pretending to be care. Different towns, same fear, different names, same structure. It was never about lawns or fences. It was about ownership disguised as order. That week, I met with the interim community board. They were nervous, not about power, but about starting over. The treasurer asked softly, "What happens now?" I looked around the room, beige walls stripped of plaques, bulletin board empty where Karen's memos once hung. Now, I said we stop acting like peace needs permission. They replaced the old rules with 3 sentences. Respect the space you share. Help when you can. No fear, no fines, no exceptions. Simple, human, unofficial, but real. No one protested. Maybe because, for the first time, the rules did not sound like threats. I still remember the first Saturday after the vote. The clubhouse doors were open, and the smell of barbecue replaced disinfectant. Kids ran through sprinklers. Music drifted down the street, not loud enough to break a rule, just loud enough to remind everyone rules had changed. Mrs. Harding brought lemonade and for the first time in years smiled without looking over her shoulder. The Alvarez family repainted their shed bright blue, not beige, and no one cared. The Chens rehung their satellite dish, this time aimed wherever they pleased. Every act of imperfection became a declaration of freedom. The lawns were not symmetrical anymore, but they were alive. Even the air felt different, heavier with laughter, lighter with relief. Karen's house sat quiet, blinds drawn. Her husband's trucks were gone by the end of the week. The floral blazer she wore that night became a symbol online, memes, headlines, hashtags. But I never laughed, because underneath all the arrogance and control I had seen something else in her eyes: fear. Fear of losing control, fear of chaos, fear of the silence she once ruled. When people asked if I thought she was evil, I said no. Evil is deliberate. What she built was desperate, a system born from fear of being ignored. She wanted order because she could not stand uncertainty. She wanted to control because she had never learned how to trust. And that is how fear turns into authority. It just needs enough paperwork to look official. A week later, the county finalized her charges: fraud, falsified records, misuse of community funds. The investigation spread to 3 other neighborhoods under the same contracting firm. The system she built to trap others ended up trapping itself. Control always forgets its own expiration date. One afternoon, I walked past the old HOA boardroom. The door was open, sunlight spilling over the once sacred mahogany desk. On the corkboard hung a handwritten sign in marker, "Community Cleanup Volunteers, Welcome." No fines, no forms. I stood there for a while smiling. The handwriting was messy, perfectly messy. By evening, the streets looked human again. Lawn chairs on driveways, uneven hedges, neighbors talking in clusters instead of whispers. Willow Ridge had finally traded symmetry for soul. And I realized then, control does not build communities, connection does. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset stain the sky orange and gold. The wind carried the scent of cut grass, the same scent Laura loved. For years, I had promised her we would find peace by the lake. Now I knew peace was not a place. It was the absence of fear. It was people laughing without asking permission. A car pulled into my driveway. Mrs. Harding stepped out with her usual smile. "You are really leaving this time, are you not?" she asked. I nodded. "It is time." She looked around at the street, the kids, the music, the imperfect houses. "Well," she said, "if you ever miss us, just remember we finally stopped mowing on schedule." We both laughed. The lake was exactly as Laura described it years ago. Still patient, endless. The cabin stood waiting porch, overlooking water that mirrored the sky. I did not unpack right away. I just stood there, letting the quiet wrap around me. No sirens, no clipboards, just wind and the soft hum of life continuing. I opened the last box labeled Laura's Things. Inside were her gardening gloves, faded pink worn thin. I took them out and dug a small hole near the porch. One by one, I planted the roses she loved, roots sinking into new soil. No witnesses, no bylaws. Just earth and memory, finally unregulated. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the lake in glass and gold. The water rippled softly, and I heard it the sound she used to describe as peace breathing. It did not sound like silence anymore. It sounded like freedom. Sometimes I still think about Willow Ridge, not the rules or the fines, but the people. How they learned that peace is not absence of noise, it is the courage to speak when someone tries to quiet you. Control writes rules, truth rewrites them. So if you are listening now from your porch, your office, or a place that still makes you whisper, remember this. You do not need permission to breathe. You do not need clearance to be free. Peace does not come from people who police you. It comes from those who finally say enough. That is why I built this channel. For stories like yours, the ones that start with control and end with courage. Maybe your HOA was not a neighborhood. Maybe it was a boss, a policy, a person who mistook fear for structure. Either way, you are not alone. Because sometimes the bravest sound in the world is not a shout. It is the moment silence breaks and someone finally says, "Not anymore."